Welcome, welcome, welcome in, everyone. Welcome to Care Concierge with CarePatrol, our monthly educational series in which we offer CEUs for nurses and social workers. So very much appreciate you making time today on a Friday to join us. I hope it is time well spent for you. Given that it is a Friday, we tend to see fewer people have the chance to join us on Fridays, but nonetheless believe it's a good day to be with you. And it is a beautiful day out. The weather is just fine. And we have a good topic today, a new topic, interesting information. And all month long in August, but most Mondays and or Fridays weekly, we will be featuring financial topics this month. And so, each month we try and have a theme. We've had legal issues, ethics, dementia, and now adding financial information. And just so that on Monday, the 8th, we'll have Bill Nolan, who's an elder care attorney, back, along with Pam Strickland, who's a Medicaid specialist, and they'll tell us more about Medicaid. And really, what I'm hoping is that you all can join us and bring some questions, because the best way to take a deep dive into a subject generally is with real world examples, specifics from your past experience or knowledge. Would love to have them have a host of questions on Monday, and I hope you'll join us then, and join us all week, or all month rather, for financial issues. So Care Concierge is a service of CarePatrol. CarePatrol, for those of you who don't know, is a referral and placement agency. And if you're not sure what that means, we're essentially the marriage between real estate and social work. So we take cases from clinicians like yourselves who are in a discharge planning mode, or referred patients or clients, we like to call them, and we go and meet them and assess their ADL requirements, their medical needs, their budget, their personality, and any other parameters that are germane, like distance to daughter's home or church family, whatever it may be. And using that information, we match providers that meet those criteria, and then we set tours and drive around our clients, sort of like a real estate agent would looking at houses. And just like a real estate agent, CarePatrol is not paid by the client. CarePatrol is paid by the seller. In other words, the people who provide the services that we refer. Now, we refer everyone. We work with skilled nursing, even though that's illegal if we were to get paid by them. And we refer other private pay providers with whom we're not contracted, other assisted livings or independent livings or specialty care assisted livings, or even in-home care companies. We contract with all who will contract with us. And even those who don't, we still refer them from time to time when it's a good fit for the family. And again, we're at no charge to them. So I'm hoping as you continue to enjoy and listen to our education, that as people come across your life or desk or mind or clinic who might need just some education, which again, we're dedicated and focused on education, who might just need some education that's at no cost, let us have their number. See if they'll give us their contact information. We'll call them, we'll update you with what we discover. And if they need services, we'll help arrange those for them. And so that's what CarePatrol does. And Care Concierge is an extension of that. It's our willingness and want to educate. That's what we enjoy doing. We love talking with families about what lies on the road ahead. And we love talking with you about things that you may not have been exposed to, that you may find interesting, or even better, that may help you in your professional lives or in your personal lives. So I think we've got a lot of folks in now. Let's go ahead to some housekeeping. As you know, when you join, your mics are muted, but you can ask questions in the chat room. And if you don't know how to get to the chat room, just take your mouse and move it across your screen, either to the top of the screen or the bottom of the screen. And in either way, you can see a little bar pop down, and one of the tabs on that bar is chat. If you click that, the chat box will come up and you can use it to ask questions or introduce yourself or for any reason whatsoever. Or you can also ask me to unmic you, or to mic you, I guess is the right application, to turn on your mic via the chat room. We are credentialed by the Alabama Board of Social Work Examiners and also by the Alabama Board of Nursing. And each of them allow us to provide you with live contact hours that we create and credential. We have to do an evaluation in order to provide you credit for being here. That evaluation we do via an app or a website called SurveyMonkey. You will have until the end of today, 8 o'clock tonight, to complete your evaluation in order to receive credit for your hour. The evaluation, as I said, is on surveymonkey.com. I have posted the address in the chat room for you all, but I also read it off because I know that some of us participate by phone or in for whatever reason, don't have access to a screen. And so for those of you who aren't able to see the screen, let me read for you the SurveyMonkey evaluation link. That link is https://www.surveymonkey.com/lowercase r/all uppercase letters Q, M as in Mary, V as in Victor, D as in David, Y, Z as in Zoo, Y. So one more time, I know we've had some people join in the middle of me reading that out. So let me read for you one more time the SurveyMonkey evaluation link. The survey is due tonight by 8 o'clock. So, I know that it's Friday and that at 4:30, someone will come in your office with something that has to be done immediately. So I don't want to ask you to put aside your day to do this, but if you can get to it by 8 tonight, that'd be great. The SurveyMonkey address is https://www.surveymonkey.com/lowercase r/all uppercase letters Q, M as in Mary, V as in Victor, D as in David, Y, Z as in Zoo, Y. That's the SurveyMonkey address. It allows us to provide you with credentials or with a certificate hour for today's session. And the fact that we have a password protection on that survey allows us to credit you with a live hour, not a recorded hour, because you are here now and you are live. And we give out a password about 12:45, 12:50. That way we know that you've been present the whole time, that you've been listening, and that you will, can receive your evaluation and your credit hour. And Ashley Talbert has also posted the link for us in the chat room for anyone who can see it. Thank you, Ashley. And let me say this, as I look today and days past at folks joining this, it seems to be, many of you seem to be the same. In other words, you're here quite often. And I want to tell you how much I appreciate that. It gives me great gratitude to feel like I'm doing something of service for you. And knowing that you participate often is a blessing. So thank you so much, y'all. Last thing on housekeeping, we load the hours onto the Alabama Board of Nursing website. I don't believe they allow you as nurses to do so anymore. Social workers, you load your own hours, and both social workers, nurses, anyone who does an evaluation will get a credit hour as well as a copy of today's presentation in case there's something you want to revisit. So let's get started with behavioral finance. We have 3 objectives. These are on the evaluation. I hope you'll grade us fairly, but candidly, because I want to feel like we're always trying to get better and getting better. And the way to do that is to have some positive, feedback. And so I appreciate y'all for answering these surveys and evaluations. Our first objective that you'll be asked is whether we've defined correctly or at all, I guess, behavioral finance. Our second objective will be that we want you to be able to list, as you walk away from this, at least 3 of the main concepts of BFI, as behavioral finance is known in short term, or in shorthand rather. So at least 3 of the main concepts, of which there are dozens. And then learn, hopefully, a little bit how to avoid certain pitfalls, or to help others avoid certain pitfalls, particularly the aging, as CarePatrol's focus is aging adults. And so, much of our education does hew that way, although we try and listen to your suggestions, and I do appreciate those on the evaluation. If you have a topic that you feel comfortable presenting, we'd love to have you be a guest presenter. Or if you have a topic you'd like us to look into, please let us know. Those are our objectives, and we'll move forward with behavioral finance. So let me ask you now, we'll get used to using the chat room. Are you familiar, any of you, with behavioral psychology? Now, I just said many of you are here fairly often. And so if you've been here with us, we talked about dialectical behavior therapy as well as cognitive behavior therapy. And so, it's not surprising then that you would have some exposure through us and through many other people, I'm sure, with behavioral psychology. But are you familiar with behavioral finance? Has anyone heard of behavioral finance before today, before seeing this topic? Are you familiar? And if you are, I hope you will definitely contribute in the chat room. Thank you all for answering. Thank you so much. I so very appreciate feeling like you're engaged and getting something, and thank you for participating. Still got a few people coming in. So let's talk about behavioral finance. What we, I'm sorry, here we are. Behavioral finance, very simply, is just why we do the things that we do with money, which is not surprising given what behavioral psychology is. So behavioral finance is the work of 2 psychologists who were working in the 70s and 80s. Daniel Kahneman, I believe I'm saying his name correct, and Amos Tversky, which I may or may not have said that correctly, but I did my best Eastern European accent. Behavioral finance is really, because it was, brought about in the 70s, 80s, a relatively new field. And it seeks to combine elements of cognitive behavioral therapy and cognitive psychological theory with conventional economic and financial theory. And the goal is to try and understand then, using that application, why people do the things they do with money. And so the mainstream economic theory says that, or makes the assumption that people are rational. I mean, we all know this is not true. So mainstream theory says the assumption is people are rational, they're free from emotion, they're unaffected by their neighbors, by their culture, by social relations, and that everybody is in effect looking out for number one. And so everyone's driven to do the same thing, which is to make money. And so, that's what mainstream theory sort of assumes. But behavioral finance sort of counters every one of those tenets. And it asks the question, why do people do the irrational things they do with their money? And so BFI, as it's known among the academics, is really good for anyone, people of all ages, hopefully you today. But it can be particularly applicable to a retiree, someone who is no longer producing revenue, but who's working or living off of, work-related income from the past. And so you may hear, as if you look into the topic, behavioral economics or behavioral finance, and some people may even use the aggregate behavioral science, but behavioral science really is more a broader term. It's generally the study of human behavior, whereas behavioral economics or behavioral finance would be a subcategory of that science, behavioral science, and it would seek to, apply psychological insight into financial and economic theory and decision making. So what behavioral finance says is that people with their money are not rational and they're not self-controlled. Search yourself. Are you self-controlled with money? And here's what I find interesting. We talk obviously on this series a lot about health, and we talk a lot about you individually, you listening, your personal health and well-being. And I just want to reiterate and underscore one other reason why it would be so helpful and important for you to maintain and manage your health would be your money. And all the other reasons as well. But our decision making, it's shown in studies, declines when we're in ill health. And we may make rash or irrational decisions while we are not well. And it impacts our future. And it impacts really any problem we address. Anytime that we are less than as less than we would like, we're under, we're not going to operate fully capably. And so here's something to chew on. Behavioral finance gave way, the thinking of it, to the idea, which is exploited by credit cards, to the idea of reward points. And so what credit cards saw was that if someone was getting something, we'll talk about later, an anchor, that they would be more likely then to spend money. So if you're getting points and then getting something, quote, for free, using those points, then that's incentive to spend money on that card. But remember, it's not free. In fact, if you have my credit rating, it's about 26% interest. And so these free things you're getting from points are not free at all. And in fact, they're a short-term decision that's having a negative long-range impact on your finances instead of paying with cash. And so BFI, as you get deeper into it, is an attempt to describe the mental shortcuts that we use that become our behavioral biases, or is it biases? I'm not sure of the pronunciation. Biases, let's go with that. And these shortcuts are known as heuristics. Can anyone else hear me? I know Lisa Barnes cannot hear me. Is anyone else having trouble hearing me? Please let me know in the chat room if you can hear me. I can hear you. Thank you, Ashley. And so BFI describes mental shortcuts or heuristics. Heuristics are very simply our attempt to learn from our experiences. So it's our ability to adapt and to learn from experience that is a heuristic. It's teaching ourselves to do something, in other words. And so we have learned then many behaviors over time, as one would imagine. Thank you all for letting me know you can hear me. I appreciate you taking the effort and making the effort to do that. Thank you. And so the dozens of biases are formed as a result, or as the end form or the end result of these heuristics, these these teaching moments that we've gathered through our lives, and these heuristics, these moments, these experiences that become imprinted on us, become then anchors. And these anchors appear to us in times of decision. And depending on our experience, different anchors may appear, and depending on our persona, etc. But one anchor, just to give you a sense of what I mean, is the manufacturer's suggested retail price. Now, I expect most of y'all have been on a car lot before, and you walk the lot and you sort of try and get close enough to the cars that you can see the number on the door without having to go, each one. So you kind of walk and check the number. And as you see those numbers, you begin to formulate in your mind, hey, they want 26,000 for that, but I bet I could get them down to 23. In fact, if I could get them down to 23, that would make my payment. And then the gig is up, y'all, because you've just done, because of this anchor, because this shared experience, when you see something, when a price is named, it is our human ability or want to negotiate. We've been bartering since we were in caves, okay? We want to negotiate. So when we see that price, we immediately engage in the negotiation. Therefore, we have done the real work of selling a car for the guy who's selling the car ourselves. We did it to ourselves. We came in and found a number. The decision to buy the car was done. By the time we started negotiating the number, the decision to buy had already been made. Then it was simply a matter of price, wasn't it? So we already made the decision to buy because of the anchor that triggered in us this human desire to negotiate and to barter and to exchange. And so that is an example of an anchor. I hope that is clear to you, because anchors sort of serve as a lot of what we're about to talk about. So, and there are many of these biases, and I said there are dozens, and there literally are, and I expect that, as the science, continues, that there will be more and more of these biases, and or they'll be congregated in smaller groups, but just some of them. And I have to tell you that if you're going after this subject, most of the literature, most of the studies, most everything I've seen is produced by the financial industry, by the stock market. And generally, they're trying to understand why people buy and sell stocks the way that they do. And so this is an application that certainly has some application for them. And this is a chart produced by one of those financial entities. I don't recall which now. Oh, Wall Street Mojo, there it is. And so some of the biases are confirmation bias, which simply means that you believe what you already know. So if someone comes to you and presents information to you that is information that you already believe to be true, then they have confirmed your assumption, even if you have not researched and educated yourself, but simply agreed with information that met your assumption. There's an experiential bias, and these apply to the aging. So in an experiential bias, clearly, if you had this experience in the past, you assume that the same experience or result will happen again, even though the circumstances and even you have changed. There's loss aversion, and this is particularly of interest to the stock market, are those folks like me who do not want to lose money, no matter what the promise is of making money in the stock market. So I have a true loss aversion. If I'm going to lose money, I would rather lose it in some other way or not at all. not at all, actually, but I'm not a stock guy, and so not that that's here nor there. There's overconfidence bias, and this is along the line of confirmation bias, except that it's not finding information that matches what you already believe. Instead, it's believing that you already know and that your ability trumps everyone else's ability because it is yours and you trust yourself. And so overconfidence is really just having a greater maybe sense of self than is merited in that particular instance. The disposition bias is a little bit like a status quo bias, in that in a disposition bias, someone is predisposed to do something, right? You've heard maybe old folks say something about someone's disposition. It's how they act, how they are, how they carry themselves. It's also a continuation of something, right? It's a continuation of who they are. So the disposition bias is simply that you sort of continue on in a sense like the status quo, because you're already leaning that way, so to speak. The familiarity bias would be, hey, I've been in this situation before and I know what to do. And so maybe an example of that would be run flat tires. So if you think about it, if you're as old as I am, when you had a flat on the highway, you would put on your spare, or then this magic stuff came and it was Fix-A-Flat. And this magic stuff called Fix-A-Flat would fill the tire with foam so you could get to the gas station and buy a tire or, change a tire somewhere other than by the side of the screaming interstate. And so Fix-A-Flat for me was, I put it on a pedestal. Love the stuff. Needless to say, I've had flats. But here's the thing. My children's car has a run flat tire on it. And when you put Fix-A-Flat in it, it destroys the tire. And so if I'm doing a familiarity bias, I'm very familiar with Fix-A-Flat. I know how it works and I love it. And I make a decision based on that familiarity, which is to put it in a run flat tire. And then I have to buy an expensive tire to replace it. So that's familiarity bias. And then mental accounting is really the process of what do I have? What do I lack? What do I have? What do I lack? What do I have? What do I lack? And that, as you can imagine, it can cause you to be paralyzed, if nothing else. So you can imagine for someone who's in their 70s or late 70s or early 80s or, even 90, 92, those persons, given what I've told you about the various types of anchors and biases, and those were just a few, but given those, you can imagine that a lifetime of experience, situational experience, would lead someone to have a whole host of these anchors. And these anchors would be not just broad, but deep. Here's one. It is, imagine someone today going, who last bought an automobile in the 1990s. So this would not be unlike someone and perhaps in their 80s to want to do. So paid $10,000 for the car they bought in the 90s, which is a fine car. But 15 years later, they want to buy a different car. Now, obviously, this is in the past, but in 2005, the average cost of the car had gone up 2.5 times. So it was now $25,000 to buy a new car. But yet the aging adult, the 80-year-old, is anchored to the idea that cars cost $10,000. And even though they're going to make the allowance that things cost more, because everybody knows things cost more every day, they're not going to make that kind of allowance. They're going to say, well, I might expect to pay 14, maybe even 16. When 25 hits them in the face, that is going to make the decision pretty quick. No, that person is unlikely to pay the price of a new automobile, given that they are anchored to their past reality. So let me ask y'all in the chat room, just because I'm curious, what is the lowest price you can remember? I'm 55 because I can answer a lot, but what's the lowest price you can remember for gas? And I can tell, like, Melissa, you must be young. If $2.99, Danielle, you're about my age, 87 cents, Ashley, 87 cents. Yeah, I'll tell a tale on myself. I'm not a smoker, but I was as a teenage, rebel. And I remember when I started smoking, that gas cost the same thing as cigarettes, 95 cents. And so if you had a $2 bill, or $2 bills is what I mean, you were a king, because you get enough gas to drive around and smoke your cigarettes. So 99 cents. Oh, Gail, your dad complained that gas went from 65 to 69 cents a gallon. Can y'all imagine? And gas I saw today was $3.99, so it's sub $4. But who thought we'd see $4, y'all? Oh, Miss Wardlow, 59 cents. Goodness. And so cigarettes to that point. So gas is now $4. It was 95 cents in 1985. And cigarettes are now $9, which were 95 cents in 1985. And so I'm just saying that if I were tied to the past and went to buy cigarettes, I would probably faint and would refuse to buy them. Thank y'all for playing with me. I appreciate that. So here's some, again, main concepts about behavioral finance. As we said, we would address them with you. So here's another: self-attribution, a little bit like overconfidence, and really is making decisions based on overconfidence. But it's particular to folks that might be really good at one thing, like even in their field, for example, like they might be really good at finance, I guess, had great success at buying a certain type of stock or kind of stock, and take that experience and and sort of believe themselves that they can then buy something else as equally well, like coal or bonds, or something that is not related, but because they have this real gift in something that is parallel, they think they can do everything, and they simply can't. And then there's herd behavior. So everybody knows, even those of you who don't remember gas being below $2, everybody remembers, or knows about, rather, not remembers, the Great Depression, 1929, when the stock market collapsed. Why did it collapse? It collapsed because of herd behavior, because people tend to mimic other people, particularly if a majority of people are doing something. And so while there was no need for a run on the banks in 29, herd mentality caused everyone to panic and to sell. And that's what crashed the banking system. In a very simplistic way. I know Dr. Blank is on here and he teaches finance, so forgive me for where I err, sir. And then with an emotional gap, that makes sense. And we all know this to be true. This is not any great science. We all know that if we make decisions in an emotional state, sad, angry, anxious, depressed, whatever it may be, joyful, that we may not really be making a decision that serves us in the long-term best term. And then anchoring, we've discussed some. It was included in my thinking because I wanted you to have a sense that anchoring really is an example of all of these biases. They all anchor us to a behavior that is patterned in us, that is now essentially subconscious. And we discussed mental accounting already. This is when people allocate money for specific purposes. And then maybe in the gross sense of this being a financial decision, it may be that you allocate X amount of money per month for clothing. And each month or every so often, you spend all of that money rather than maybe having a second thought and saying, well, gosh, I've got all this money saved already. Maybe I could do something else with it. So mental accounting might lead us to allocate and then use up our resources without really taking into account the long-term picture, if that makes sense to you. Now, confirmation bias we discussed already. It's basically when you whatever your belief is that you seek or find or agree or are met with things that reinforce that belief. And no matter whether or not it is the right belief, you are dogged in pursuing it. And the experiential bias is essentially a sort of black and white experience of the world in which you make a decision, even an irrational decision, because you had a similar bad experience. And so I think that's self-explanatory. Experiential loss aversion, we discussed, not wanting to lose money, not wanting to take risk. And I think many of us are familiar with the idea of risk aversion and folks who are not likely to go out on a limb as opposed to other folks who will hang themselves by it. And then there's overconfidence. And this again is simply overestimating yourself. And I'm certainly guilty of that. I'm sure we all are at times. And then at times, I'm sure we undervalue ourselves. And then the disposition bias we discussed, this is you're essentially predisposed to continue acting in the same way, almost in a way that of status quo. The example here that you might recognize would be if you bought stock. So I'll tell you, back in the late 90s, mid 90s, a friend of mine was working doing the advertising for a company called Books A Million. It's based in Florence, Alabama. And my friend was telling me all the things that they were about to do, as a company and the milestones they were going to hit. And I got the desire to go buy their stock. So I bought 1,000 shares. It wasn't much money, truly, certainly affordable for me. So I bought 1,000 shares. And over the course of the next 3 years, those shares became essentially worthless. Because even though the company was doing all these great things and meeting all these milestones, it was the ownership were still dividing the stock, splitting the stock. So what I bought became worth less and less and less and less. As well, the stock underperformed. And my understanding later was that, the leadership felt the company had some other benefits by underperforming. And I don't know what those were. And it may not even be true. But the point is, I bought stock when I had no reason to do so because I had no knowledge of it. I used, sort of overconfidence because I overestimated my ability. And I did not listen to my loss aversion, which now rings very loudly when I think about buying stock. So those are just some of the main concepts. And I'm hoping that, again, on the evaluation that you've been able to retain at least 3 of these just out of, interest. And so recency bias, we'll talk about a little deeper because again, CarePatrol is focused on the aging adult. And so we want to try and tailor our education at times to issues that may be germane to aging. And in the end, hopefully, each of us, you and I, will grow old ourselves. So the recency bias is when you look at the most recent occurrence of events that may have been an aberration, instead of looking at the long history of similar events that are maybe a little farther in the past. And so here's an example of how that might affect an older person. So, you know, in 2007, 8, we had a downturn in 2000, 2001, 2. And it, you know, indicators are we're heading there. Which scares me, but if let's say that we are heading there, the irrational decision here, the recency bias, the heuristic learning that is applying here is that someone might say, we've got to get our money out. The stock market's about to crash. 1929 is coming back. And taking out money with penalties and taxes that could have been left in and taken out at a correct time and perhaps lost a little money. But again, in the stock market, you play the long play. And so you do leave it in to a point, not when it becomes worthless, as I did. But so the problem here would be taking out one's money irrationally because of a fear of another downturn, because of the most recent downturn and what happened with your stocks 8 years ago or however long ago it was now. So when the stock markets fall, recency bias then would make you think we've got to divest, we've got to get out, we've got to sell, no matter what it costs us in penalties. So let me ask you all this in the chat room. If you can see the image here, there's a glass. The glass has water in it. And I want to ask you, is this glass half full or is this glass half empty? Lisa Barnes, I wonder if we're related, Lisa. Half full. You're half full, people, I see. That's great. That's great. I'm glad you're half full, people. My husband would see it as half empty. Well, yeah, and you know, it takes two, Gil. So between y'all got a full glass of water. It depends on the day, Janae. Thank you. Half full. Well, frankly, it doesn't matter, does it, if it's half full or half empty? But what we're illustrating here is framing. And framing is how something's presented. So that was presented neutral. And so you had the ability then to make the decision. You did make that decision, know it or not, using this heuristic bias of some sort related to whatever your thinking is about water and volume. And so those things informed the decision you just made. But it could also be in how it was framed. And so imagine this, how this might affect the older person. You could say to someone who's turning 62, man, you need to go down to the Social Security office. You can get $700 a day, or a month rather, just for being 62. And if it's put that way, then you might think, well, sure, I need to go ahead and collect. I need the money. I mean, I like the money. I'd be grateful for the money. I'm going to go get my $700. Or someone might say to you, you know what? You're 62 today. You know, if you took your Social Security today, you'd make about $700. But if you wait about 5 years, you can take $1,000 a month. And if you wait 2 years more, you'll make another $240 a month. So you might think about getting your pension benefit signed up today for $700, or you might think, you know what, I can wait and I can make myself $540 by waiting 7 years. And after all, 62 is the new 52. It's very young. Most of us work and will be working. And it makes sense to delay taking Social Security as long as you can. So it depends, though, on how it's framed to you. The status quo bias, again, could plague the older adult because they would have clearly, as we said, an age, a lifetime of these biases, collecting. And the idea might be just to stay the course of action or tendency. And you do see this with older folks. There's seems to be an age at which people stop buying clothes and furniture and automobiles. And I know this because I have a little move management business. So I move a lot of folks and I go through their closets and their furniture and everything, frankly. But you can see that it's dated almost always to the age of when they had children. It's interesting. But the status quo bias might play out in a way that you wouldn't expect, like organ donation. So Austria has an organ donation rate of 99%. 99%. Now, Germany, which abuts Austria, they share a language, they share a culture, they share a cuisine, they share wine. They are very almost homogenous in many ways. And yet in Germany, the participation rate for organ donation is only 15%. Why do you suppose that would be? It's this. In Austria, the default, when you get your license the first time, the default is that you will be an organ donor. You have to actively uncheck the box. And naturally, people, when they're getting their driver's license, don't even think about that. They're focused on something else. And then when they renew every however many years it is, therefore here, the box is checked and they don't think to take a different approach and uncheck the box. So status quo plays a part. And in Germany, the opposite is true. You have to check the box to be an organ donor and uncheck it if you don't want to be an organ donor. So the default is you're not going to be. So hence there's a lower percentage. And as people renew, they don't, again, take time and change and think and check or uncheck a box. This is how status quo or inertia will take hold of decision-making in a sort of, I don't want to say sinister way, but a nuanced way you might not expect. Think about it this way, in another nuanced way. Think about the layout on the phone in your hand and the icons present. Couple things. One is the person who made that phone, unless you've turned it off, is tracking you, may be listening to you, certainly knows where you are or the phone is. It knows what you buy. The phone has a lot of knowledge about you because you don't uncheck the box to say, I don't want you to know this. And if you continue to open the program, the box stays how you left it. So they continue to collect information. But maybe a more useful way to think about this is, when's the last time you moved the icons on your phone? Have you ever moved the icons on your phone? Or do they stay the way that they pop up or came when you got it? This sort of inertia with just having things remain as they are can really have a deleterious effect on our finances as we age and quite frankly, now. And in a way that it can be detrimental for an older person, the status quo is, let's say that you have cable in all of the bedrooms in your house and you're 65 and no one lives in your house but you and your spouse. And yet, because of status quo, because this bill comes out monthly and you've always paid it, you continue to pay for cable in a lot of bedrooms that no one ever goes in. And so you're losing money because of the status quo. Same thing with insurance. When's the last time you changed insurance or shopped insurance? Do you know if you could get a better deal or better coverage or both? The status quo, that heuristic belief of leaving things as they are, is at play here. Now, this is not a knock on people. There's actually something called lame brain psychology. And what it says is that we have two brains. We have an old brain and a new brain. The old brain is reptilian and emotional. And you may know this, but the reptilian emotional brain is at the front of our brains, the same place the olfactory is located. Think about this. Have you ever had an instance in life where a smell, you noticed a smell and you were all of a sudden transported back to the school lunchroom or your grandmother's kitchen or the beach or some other place and time that has, that you feel, you sense you are there when you smell it? That's because this memory brain and olfactory brain are so close and so old and make these old connections. The old brain is our subconscious. The new brain is our conscious. So the old brain is super fast, 4 billion bits of information per second, sort of autopilot. This is, our heartbeat, our blood pressure, our breathing, all of these things. Excuse me, I went one too far. And the new brain is responsible for things like deciding to go to the moon or take calculus. And this is where our consciousness is in our new brain. This is where our thinking takes place, but our thinking is much slower. However, most of our routine financial decision-making, again, because it's rote, because there's inertia, it's status quo, is old brain thinking. And the old brain, we already know, can be influenced by something as simple as a smell. It can be transported. And so the old brain is not making good decisions about money because it is too involved in some other processes like emotions. Financial decisions are better made by the new brain at a slower speed. So with the overconfidence bias, and I see that I'm getting close on time, I'll speed up. If you want to avoid this bias and you're in the stock trade, and I know because we asked, if not today, in the past, how many of you bought stock, and a high percentage of y'all own stock. And so basically in overconfidence, trade less and invest more. And basically what they're saying here is you're not going to beat the system, just like you're not going to beat the house at a casino. And so play the games that you have the best odds at and put money down and ride them like craps or roulette. The odds are in their favor. You've got to build wealth. You've got to have the patience to do it over time. And resist this notion that you may have that because you have the ability to do this or that, you have the ability, therefore, to do everything at an exemplary level, because you just might not. Confirmation bias, how we can avoid this is we just, instead of seeking out a mirror of information, we can seek out new information. So if you're someone who watches Fox News, try watching MSNBC. If you're someone who watches MSNBC, try watching Fox News, and see if you can at least, through the rhetoric, understand the position that really is at the bottom of both arguments, because there is a middle ground. We just have to find it. So let's seek fresh information from news sources who are vetted and trusted, and not seek advice from ourselves or anyone else who has a tendency to give us bad advice. The relativity bias is keeping up with the Joneses. And what we have to remember is that we're all different. We all have a unique set of circumstances. We have our own past, our own education, our own idiosyncrasies, our own likes and dislikes. So it is impossible and irrational and unreasonable and unadvisable to compare ourselves to other people. While we do want to be aware of others, mindful of others, attentive to others, we do not want to put their situation and views on top of us, because their situation and views are relative contextually to them and only them. We cannot be them. We can be aware, but beware of this trait in ourselves and think contextually about our life and what makes sense in our situation, not in our colleagues. And then anchoring. So each of these biases, as we've discussed, have a trap or have an anchor. The anchor is the trap. And what we've seen really is that there's nothing we can do about these anchors. We can try and incentivize people, punish people, reward people, and yet the biases tend to persist. Our code word, password for today, is B5. And that's a capital B, E, F, I. Stands for behavioral finance. B5 is the password, B5. And so we know, and let me speed up, old folks are trying to minimize, or not trying to, they must minimize their expenditure of energy. And they must then sometimes make decisions devoid of energy, in which case these behavioral biases might take hold. So the goal is to get us into new thinking, planning, researching, interviewing, discussing, ruminating. And of course, if this was easy, we would all do it. It's not easy, but we can all try to do it. One thing we can tell the aging folks is beware of delayed gratification. You are now 78 years old. It's time to use your grandmother's china. It's time to give your pearls to your granddaughter. It's time to give the old truck to your grandson. It's time to have the joy that giving brings. And this also includes our financial wherewithal. So let's be measured here. If we're giving gifts of cash, let's be measured and preserve the lion's share for us so that the remainder can be bequeathed when we die. Now, with taxes with the elderly, taught them away from quarterly payments into a payment that is one time on a per distribution basis when they would draw funds from their 401k or pension, and only then. Try and do automatic payments after you have researched and made sure you've got the best deal, which you should do annually. After you've done that, put everything on automatic so you don't have to worry about loss. You're losing time, you're losing money, losing life. Let's minimize that. Let's put those things out of our head. Fear of running out is the aging ability. Well, Melissa, let me check again. Maybe someone else could try for the password. Capital B as in boy, E as in Edward, F, I. Capital B, lowercase E, F, I. So if you're having fear of running out, do small bequest. We know people are irrational with their money. We've identified biases for all folks and the aging. Although most of this is on, there's almost no research on the older adult. If you want to read about this, behavioral finance, there's a good book. It's by Joachim Goldberg and Rudiger von Nietzsche, and it's called Behavioral Finance. The ISBN, which is the way that the bookstore or the library can look it up, is here on the screen if you want it. Remember, you will get this presentation. And that is it for today. I'm sorry to rush there at the end. I hope we covered enough information for you. Jan, I'm going to post the link for you right here. It's right below your comment, and I'll read it for those of you that need me to do so one more time. The SurveyMonkey evaluation link is at https://www.surveymonkey.com/r/all uppercase letters Q, M as in Mary, V as in Victor, D as in David, Y, Z as in Zoo, Y. That's the SurveyMonkey evaluation link. Our password is capital BEFI. And we thank you. Remember to try and join us Monday when we have Bill Nolan and Pam Strickland discussing more about Medicaid. Come and bring your questions and enjoy a CEU on Care Patrol. Thank you for joining Care Concierge with Care Patrol. Please contact us at any time. If you have trouble with the survey, my email is sbarnes with an ES at carepatrol.com, where you can also make referrals. If you have someone that just needs information, I love to educate. We're free. Please send them to me. Be happy to help anyone and everyone who comes. Y'all have a great weekend, a great rest of the day. Thank you as always for being here, and thank you for all that you do. We appreciate you and are grateful for you to be here.